Okay. Welcome everyone to my capstone presentation. Thank you all for coming. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Zoe. I'm a double major in creative technologies and filmmaking. I've been involved in filmmaking since like middle school when I did my video production after school activities. So I've been doing it for about 8 years. And it's been one of my life's biggest passions. For the past 4 years, I've worked at Viking Fusion in a lot of different roles. I started out as a videographer as a freshman. I moved into a studio assistant role my second semester. I was production supervisor, which means I oversaw short films and other podcasts and stuff like that for my sophomore year. And then for the past 2 years, my junior and senior year, I've been executive director, which means that I'm in charge of everyone. And then I've spent my summers interning at Camp Ozark as a videographer, and I've been able to learn a lot from a lot of people from across the United States and all of their cool programs like UT and University of Arkansas. So it's been really beneficial to have that internship as well. And it's also been pretty fun. So my theme is developing, it's also about lighting, that's crazy, developing and understanding lighting through cinematography and prototyping. And we'll be exploring that through a couple of my different projects. For the first project, it's my long distance lamps, which was my final project for Creative Technologies 101, Intro to Prototyping. My second one is Colonel Mustard's house, which I made for Chris's class, 235 Physical Computing. And then my third one is a short film I made for Viking Fusion called Dearest Alfie. And then my fourth one is my senior capstone project, a documentary about diversity in film. So my first one are my long distance lamps. Essentially, they're two lamps that are connected by Wi-Fi through the internet. And if you touch one of them on the touch sensor, it'll change the color of both of them after like a minute or so, no matter where the other lamp is. So it could be all the way in Texas, and I could touch mine in Georgia and the light would still change as long as that lamp is connected through Wi-Fi. So I used a couple of different things. I used a touch sensor. I used a Wi-Fi enabled ESP32. I coded it with Arduino, and I cut the box with the laser cutter, and then I just painted it. You can't see it very well, and I don't have them anymore. So, but I painted them so that they're kind of like themed. And the purpose of the entire thing is just to connect people across the world. I have a lot of friends that, especially because of camp, that exist in states that are 13 hours away from me. And so I just thought it would be really awesome to be able to just have a little piece of them in my room, and they can have a piece of me in their room. And I feel like that's a experience a lot of people have, especially when you go to college and that kind of stuff. So the process of it, this was one of my first projects as a CRT person. I was a filmmaking major taking it as an elective. And it was quite a big undertaking to take on as someone who had no clue anything that I was doing, especially coding and woodworking and that kind of stuff. And thank you to Zane for staying up with me for 2 weeks. We were trying to get these ESP32s to work or connect in any way, shape, or form. And for 2 weeks, Zane sat with me until 1 a.m. probably every single night, just trying to get them to work in any way, shape, or form. And so once they did work, it was so awesome. And so coding it was definitely a big hurdle, but we were able to overcome it. And they worked for a pretty long time. And that was pretty awesome to do, like as someone that hadn't even thought about being a creative technologies major before that moment. What I gained from it, it set a foundation for my coding and also designing interactive lights. That's one of my main things. My go-tos when I'm thinking of a project now is some sort of interactive light display. I've learned a lot from Zane. It's been pretty, I really enjoy lighting. And so that's one of my things. And then I think that it made every project after that moment feel easier because it was so difficult to code it, especially as like one of my first projects. And so it was a great foundation for Chris's classes later on and that kind of stuff. I also learned how to fail before this moment. I still don't like to make mistakes or like to fail, but I've definitely learned how to take it better in stride, especially because I think we failed on this every single night. So it definitely exposed me to failure and helped me learn like ways to overcome it and not feel horrible. And then it also set a foundation for all the lab materials, like the laser cutter. I didn't even know what a laser cutter was before I came into this class. And so now I use a laser cutter for like all of my projects. I use Arduino every single time I code and all that kind of stuff. So it really set a great foundation for everything I did after that moment. So then I decided to become a minor, and that's when I started taking some of Chris's coding classes. So for this one, I made a little house for Colonel Mustard. And if you don't know who Colonel Mustard is, he's like Viking Fusion's little mascot. It's basically a wooden enclosure with a acrylic top to it, so you can see through him. There are neopixels going around him to light him, with a potentiometer to change the color for any of his moods. And there's also an ultrasonic rangefinder that if you get too close to him, the lights will turn red and it'll be a buzzer in order to protect him and also yourself. So the process of that, I kind of learned from my one-on-one project. I started small and then I added things as I figured out other things. So I started with just putting neopixels in a box with an acrylic top. And then Chris said, that's not a final project. So then I started adding other things like the potentiometer to change the colors. And once I got that to work, I added like an ultrasonic rangefinder, which we hadn't used that entire class. So that was really fun to try kind of figure out. And then I lined it up with a buzzer and all that kind of stuff. So one of the biggest challenges for me for this one, you can kind of see it on this next slide. So there's an acrylic box, and it's supposed to slide into these little things, and I had to put it on the table saw, which if you know me, I'm very scared of woodworking, and so putting it on that table saw was kind of scary, but also lining them up perfectly so that the acrylic would actually fit in there was very difficult. And it ended up not fitting exactly right, and so what we did was it was only one side that was like a millimeter off, and so it wouldn't go all the way in. So we cut the amount of that from just that side so that it still goes in on all the other sides, and then that one side is just not in the holes basically. So what I gained from that project, I was able to iterate on concepts from my one-on-one project and adding new interaction like devices. And so I was able to feel more comfortable with potentiometers, ultrasonic rangefinders, and find new ways to make them interactable. I was able to explore the idea of making it to light something as opposed to just making a lamp that goes in my room. And that leads into like the next couple of things. And I felt more comfortable in the wood shop, which I still am a little scared of it, but at least I tried, and that's okay. But yeah, so exploring it to light something kind of leads into my short films I made for Viking Fusion. This one's my favorite. So this one's called Dear Selfie. It explores relationships, mental health, and understanding. It's about a group of journalists who find out there's this outcast living on their campus, and they decide to make a documentary about him to try and drive him off. And it ends up that, he's not that bad of a guy. And so my role was the director of photography. And for those of you that have never been on a film set, that just means that I'm in charge of the placement of the camera and making sure each shot is lit well and looks good. I also planned with the director for like color schemes for each one. So from this top one, that's kind of from Alfie's point of view. So everything that is from Alfie, who is the outcast, he's kind of in this dreamlike state. We did a certain, I blanked on the word, but we put those black bars on the side to make it kind of look a bit more older, and he's in this dreamlike state because that's just what he's thinking about. And then for the parts where they are documenting it, we filmed it actually not on our like cinema lenses, but we filmed it with the cameras that reporting and writing students use. And then we wanted it to look kind of older, as if it was filmed with like this really, really old camcorder. And so we edit it to see like, if you can kind of see the lines atop it. So it kind of looks like it's like grainy and that kind of stuff. So that's what we kind of did. And then when it was real life, everything was very flat and blue and that kind of stuff. And so we had to kind of figure out the vibe of each segment and what we wanted it to look like. And then we executed that with our lighting and that kind of stuff. There were a lot of problems with the actual scheduling of the film. And so that was one thing that was really difficult. And then when we finally did actually get to schedule it, it was freezing cold rain, and it was like 1 a.m. and everybody wanted to go home, and we were standing in mud, and trying to keep morale up was really difficult, but we ended up making a really good product. And so that was pretty exciting. Here we have my favorite shot of the film. And you can this is where I think a lot of this, it's freezing cold raining, by the way. And so if you know anything about rain, you can't really light a fire at that time. So what we did, there's actually no fire happening at all in this shot. And we had some lights kind of from down here where the fire would have been. And then we had a couple of people just taking reflectors and going like this onto their faces, which made it get this like flickering effect. I wish you could see it a bit better, but yeah, so that's kind of some of the tactics that we use to get around some of our parameters. But what I gained from this, I got real world set experience, how to be a leader on set. Keeping morale up was definitely pretty difficult, and making sure that everybody was on task while still having a fun time was very important to me and the director. So we made sure that that happened. I think everyone that was on that set would say it was a pretty fun shoot, even though we stood in mud and the freezing rain. One thing that I learned is project management. That's similar for creative technologies. Just making sure that everything gets done on time. It was definitely pretty difficult, especially with this being one of our first major short films that we did. And so, yeah. And then it was our first major production using our new lighting and grip equipment, which we got from Ryan Simmons, who is a business owner in the area. He lent us a lot of really professional lighting stuff. And so it was pretty exciting to be able to use all of that and implement what we learned in his lighting class that we took. And then I also started understanding light and how it can be used to tell a story. So each part of the story is lit completely differently. And so it was fun to be able to experiment with light and how that can prompt the audience to understand what's going on at any given time. Which moves on to diversity in film. This is my capstone project. I took the advocacy pathway, and it's a documentary detailing how high school programs are currently changing the industry, specifically diversifying it. We showed it on Thursday evening, and so far I've gotten 3 responses. All of them are 5s, so at least there's that. So pretty positive reviews. For the process, step 1, get people to interview. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was this thing called COVID at the beginning of the semester, and high schools were not very accessible to me. We had one high school that I got all the way to the part where the teacher was like, yeah, I think we're greenlit, you're good to go. And then a random Friday morning at like 1 a.m., the assistant principal emailed me and said, absolutely not, there's no chance you're doing this. And so I was 3 weeks into the semester and had to start back at square one, which was terrifying. But then I stumbled upon the FAME pathway at the College and Career Academy in Rome, and they are awesome. And so I think it was you know, a twist of fate that I got to interview the FAME pathway, because they just had really dedicated kids. They had really just awesome stuff that they have made. My next kind of problem with script writing is hard. I've never been a script writer, and you know, I might not ever be, but that's okay, because I made through this one and I think it turned out pretty good. And then that last thing, changing concepts. I originally wanted this to explore how high school film programs involve girls and women into the industry, because this is how I got started in it. But after interviewing a lot of the students and meeting with a lot of the kids that are in that program, I just wanted to tell the story of just diversity overall, because the FAME pathway was so diverse in both ethnicity, skin color, and just there were a lot of girls in there. So I just wanted to tell the story of everyone that was actually in that program. And so we changed it from girls in the industry to diversity in the industry. So that's one thing that we did. Here's one of the interviews, Jelena and Matt. And so that's what they kind of look like. If you didn't get to see it, I would encourage you to go watch it if you want to. You know? But what I gained, I was able to do a full-scale documentary from beginning to end on my own, which was pretty cool. I got to connect with students that were really passionate about the industry, and they have my emails. They email me with questions about college and career and all that kind of stuff. I got to use my lighting skills that I've learned over the past 4 years to effectively light everyone. Lighting for different skin tones is not a very well talked about thing in the industry, so I wanted to make sure everybody looked exactly like lit well. And I was able to tell the kids' stories as well as my own. My documentary got put in the Rome News Tribune, so it kind of validated their stories as well as mine. But what's next for me? I just received an internship at Trilla Studios in Atlanta. Whoa! And so that's pretty cool. And one of the major things that Trilla is currently focused on is creating the newest filmmaking technologies. So they have a whole creative technologies department, and I just think that that's really cool. So I can combine my love for both. Yep, there it is. So yeah.